Welcome back to the Now What podcast, a podcast focused on young adults, epilepsy, and the problems they face. I'm Karan.
And I'm Sophie, and we're advisors to the Cameron Voice Foundation, as well as your hosts. TCBF honors the legacy of our best friend Cameron by aiming to cure epilepsy through funding research, education, and awareness campaigns while still supporting causes that weren't important to Cameron.
And this podcast wouldn't be possible without our amazing sponsor, UCB. So thank you, UCB, for making these conversations happen. Each week, we're going to discuss an important topic related to epilepsy and young adults. And this week, we're covering young adults thriving with epilepsy.
So our guest this week is definitely the definition of a young adult thriving with epilepsy. We are very excited to have her. You may recognize her from World of Dance or The Next Step on the Family Channel. She is a dancer, actress, model, and entrepreneur. And she has a really incredible journey with epilepsy, and we're excited for you guys to hear it straight from her. We will be talking with Briar Nolet. So I hope you enjoy the episode. We'll get right into it. Hi, Briar. Welcome.
Hello. How's it going? Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here with us. We personally, I've been so moved about hearing about your story, and today we're going to be talking about thriving with epilepsy. And for those of listeners that don't know your story, I actually kind of just wanted to jump right in, and if you could just tell the audience about your story and your diagnosis with epilepsy.
Yeah, totally. So my first experience with epilepsy, or I guess like a seizure in general, was when I was about 16. So prior to the age of 16, I had never been unconscious, never fainted, never had a seizure, never had any experience with being, unconscious in any sense. And I remember, because I'm a high performance athlete and a dancer, learning choreography as a dancer in all styles of dance was not foreign to me at all. It was something I did on a regular basis, 6 to 8 classes a day, learning 2 minutes of choreo in 30 minutes, having to perform it, film it, whatever it may be, again, across all styles. So it was interesting because I remember one summer when I was taking classes at a convention, I was learning choreo and I would blank out and my body would almost just jerk. I wouldn't have a seizure, I wouldn't be unconscious, but my body would just shift, and it was almost just a blank out. I know for you guys, if you're acting and you have a script and you just kind of blank out and forget what's next, and then you kind of jump back into it. It was almost like that, but with dance, my body would just kind of have more of a reaction. And I thought that it was odd, but I was so young and obviously never thought about anything, so just kind of felt that was off. So being in a convention setting, I remember all my friends, we were just kind of laughing about it, because we were in class. So I would just kind of be that was weird, but keep going. But my teachers knew that something was off, because they're this isn't like Briar. It seemed like I was completely fooling around, completely, because I would just jump into a random position and then just laugh with my friends, and it looked like I was disrespecting the teacher. So I got in so much trouble, I remember, and they would go to my mom and be what is going on with Briar? This is a massive convention and she's just not focused, and something's happened. My mom's okay, weird, this isn't typically like Briar. But anyways, the teachers talked to me, my mom talked to me, and I was I don't know, I'm just giving it my best, and my body's just doing this weird thing, but I'll keep going with it. So I kept going. The rest of the convention was fine. I just remember that one specific class, and it kept happening, and my schedule was picking up. I was 16, but I was filming the Disney show, The Next Step, as you guys know, also from, 5, 6 in the morning till who knows at what time. But I was still in high school and also still dancing full time at my studio. So as soon as I wrapped, I would run to the studio and just hop into whatever classes I could get into for the rest of the night. And I remember my first seizure was this night. So I was on set all day, went to this hip hop class that was my typical hip-hop class, but I arrived late. And so I had to catch up on all the choreo that they had learned already on top of what they were continuing to teach. So my mind was just kind of in this overload for what it felt like. And I remember I was getting those blank outs, but I was okay, it's at this point normal. I had felt it a million times, and nothing came from it. So I just kept going with it. And then I remember we were going into groups because the combo had finished being taught. And at this point, we were just performing it. It was night at night, the last class of the day. My sister was actually in that class, and it was a massive class. It was almost 2 companies put together. And I went into a group, and I remember I got that same blank out feeling, but the blank out almost stuck. So my mind went into this blur, and it stayed in this blur, and my vision kind of blurred as well. but I was still conscious, if that made sense. But I didn't know what was happening, and my right hand would start to shake. So I like would blank out, my mind would stay in this blur. My right hand always would shake out to the left corner of the room. Like it was always so weird. And now I've learned that it's just because it was like the left side. It's some like neurological, like, yeah, it was like,
wow.
so it was always my right hand. I would reach out to the left. And at this point, I didn't know what was happening. So I couldn't really yell for help, or I didn't really know to get to my knees. So I just like remember my right hand shaking to the left, and I would like tense up, and then I would be like unconscious before I hit the floor. And then I just remember waking up like on the floor on the other side of the room. There was no one in the room except for my teachers. And I was like, did I just pass out? Like, what's happening? And then I just remember the ambulance coming, my parents coming in, and no, my teacher was like, no, I think you had a seizure. So anyways, I was still young. I saw a pediatric neurologist. They did all of the EEGs, and they're like, no, you're fine. You don't have epilepsy. It was only happening in a dance setting, which also is so weird. Like it was only learning choreo, specifically when it's
so weird,
because hip hop is so fast and like intricate. So my mind would just go into overload and shut down.
And at this point, did you think like, when you were having these like blankouts, as you described them, did you think like, oh, I'm just exhausted, I'm tired? Like, how did you kind of like categorize it in your head?
Yeah, that's what my parents and I were thinking. We're like, maybe I'm just overtired, because again, like being on set early mornings, and then when I wasn't on set actually filming, I was in tutoring. So I was doing my school and then jumping into classes till 10, 11, and then repeating, right? Like I was used to the crazy busy lifestyle, but I don't know. My parents were like, okay, if it's not epilepsy and that's ruled out, I don't know. Let's just try and take some stress off her plate, kind of see what it is. But I kept getting those blankouts, and then the seizures kept getting worse and more frequent because I was dancing so much, and the Disney show I'm on is dance related. So I was learning choreo for that show as well. So I had a few when we were prepping for a tour. I remember one was pretty bad. It was like after lunch. So I was chewing gum, and we were just reviewing the combo, and I had a full seizure, and like my friend Isaac tried to like get the gum out of my mouth, and I almost like bit his fingers off. And I've never like, my parents, luckily, have actually never seen my seizures because they've always just been in a dance studio. My sister saw the one because she was in that class. But aside from that, it's just always been in dance studios. I had like some in LA, Dance Spirit Magazine, like in New York. They started to happen super frequently. But again, we didn't really know what it was. I started seeing like different neurologists, different testings, but like nothing was coming through. And they were all like, okay, well, if it's just dance, then like, just don't, like kind of like just don't do it. Like, stay away from it, because I could drive, I could like work out. Like it was some sort of just like the memorization, connecting like neurological memorization to like a motor skill, where there was like some disconnect in my body and mine would just completely shut off and shut down.
Did you start using the word, at what point, like, did you start identifying it as seizures? Was it after that, like, convention?
Right off the top. Yeah, like they were pretty clear apparently. Like, again, I haven't seen one, or no one's kind of recorded it for me, but apparently, like, especially because I'm a dancer, like my legs are like flailing, like they started to again get worse. Like some were like 5 minutes. Like I was like blue in the face, like biting my tongue.
Yeah.
And like I'd wake up with literally just like my mouth, like popping blood vessels in my forehead, in my face, like super tense. And just, I remember after all of them, like I was just so tired. Like I remember waking up always to like the paramedics on top of me, even though I would tell everyone like, I'm fine, you don't have to take me to the hospital. I think it's just obviously such a scary thing to see that everyone was just like, call the ambulance. And so I couldn't tell them not to take me, even though like we knew that I was going to be okay. And it was tough because since I'm Canadian, being in the States, I remember my parents getting like a $30,000 like bill.
Wow.
I like had to take an ambulance and like get all these testings done in America. And like, obviously they wanted me to be safe, but it's just tough to tell people like, don't call the ambulance when it looks like I'm,
That's one of the things that people really don't know about seizures and epilepsy. And also when you don't have even a diagnosis at the time to tell people, then they're like, of course they're going to call because they are going to assume if they don't know you, they just never happened to you.
Exactly. So luckily, like a few of them were around like the people on the Disney show. And once they saw one, they kind of knew. But I'm also the type of person that like my friend Jordan, who was around for a lot of them, she'd be like, hey, Briar, like, you look a little bit like you're, anxious about this one. You sit down for a second. I'm like, no, I'm fine. And then of course, later it sends me into one. So I think at first it was like seizures, and then it started to get worse though, where like, I think almost the anxiety, like I'd be in a dance and be like, okay, like this could happen right now. And then I'm also in like high stress environments where one, like I'm prepping for a tour, or two, I'm in on audition. So it's like kind of like this can't happen right now. And like I think it started to just like pile up where I wasn't even fully dancing. I would do like a count of 8, but being in a dance studio would almost like send me into one. And then it started to get worse though. It wasn't just dance. Like I wouldn't have the seizures, but those blankouts started to like occur when I was writing too fast or talking too fast or like memorizing scripts, like anything to do with like a motor skill connected to memorization. the dance,
Wow.
like the seizures, but like the blank outs started to happen when I was, like writing, typing, anything like that too quick. Cause I'm very quick. So I knew that like
Yeah.
this was kind of the start.
So when did that kind of like, when did this escalate? This obviously happened to you a lot before you
Mhm.
started like any kind of diagnosis medication journey, or I mean, you tried to get diagnosed with something and they didn't know.
Well, 16 to 18 was like, I had like 20 to 40 seizures for like over the 2 years, like a lot. And like
Wow.
my parents were obviously like, everyone was trying to take me out of the studio. They're like, Briar, okay, if this is only happening in dance studio, like maybe
Stop.
we
Yeah.
should like
Yeah.
maybe just figure it out first and then come in. But I'm like, so not like that. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'll just improv then, because like improv doesn't require my brain and I seem to be fine with that. But then, it kept happening and we kept seeing neurologists. It was just no one could figure it out. So eventually we went to like a concussion specialist because with partnering and dancing, there was a few times where I like would smack my head on the floor and I was like, hey, maybe it stemmed from that. But eventually I think I can't remember how exactly I found my current neurologist, but it was just connected through like a family doctor who knew a neurologist and then suggested this one. So I went to see him. He did like the typical EEGs with like the lights and laying there for 3 hours. I even did like an overnight one in the hospital, but it had like, they were like, you're fine. Like there's no, like the pediatric neurologist said, there's no kind of like hint here where we're like, oh, it's epilepsy. But he was amazing. And he ended up putting me on an EEG and I had to wear it home for like a week where he could track my waves through like my day to day. And that's where they found it, because it was just like random spikes where maybe I was in a dance studio, maybe I wasn't, but they found it there, luckily. So I was so relieved. I was like so happy. I was like, at least this is a diagnosis. It's a start. So then I got like presented with 3 different medications, which was kind of the tough part because I wasn't really sure. One of them was guaranteed to work, but obviously had the most side effects. The other one was guaranteed to work, but after 6 months. And then one of them wasn't guaranteed to work, but had the least amount of side effects and was kind of like a 50-50 chance. So being so young, I was like 18. I still had like, I was honestly the peak of my dance training. Like I was like, this is kind of tell if I'm going to go professional or not. So I was like, okay, I want this to work, but I also want to take care of my body. And so we tried the one that was like 50-50 because I obviously didn't want the side effects, or wanted to try to see if I could, settle it without having them. And luckily it worked. I mean, I was like so crazy. Like I was in the studio the next week. I remember it was like Christmas of like 2016 or 2017. And I would just slowly ease back into it, like it was just like my teacher. And he would just teach me like a count of 8, see if I had any side effects, do like across the floor, go into like a hip hop class with like people I knew, and then slowly would kind of like work my way up. But it's definitely been a journey. Like I'm still on it to this day. I still take it twice a day. And sometimes like I'm allowed to take 3 if I'm like like going into a massive audition where like I need to be on, because just like the PTSD and anxiety of it, like I'm literally, it's funny, like my seizures are literally my profession, I guess. So like I teaching or assisting and have to pick up a 2-minute combo on a dime in front of 2,000 kids and they're following me and I have to figure it out and do it. So it's definitely been like a learning curve, and he wants to try and ease me off them. But obviously right now, like I'm at the peak of
I mean, that's what you're doing all the time. It's not.
We're like, let's just leave it for now. And when you start to kind of phase out of the dancing as much as you're doing, we can kind of see if we can.
But I think there's something important to that, because I feel like you hear so often, particularly with like seizure medication, but all medication, of people being, like medication itself has a stigma, and people like wanting to get off of it too quickly just because they're like, well, I don't want to be on medicine. And it's not always the best answer. So I mean, I give you a lot of credit for not like trying to rush the process to get off the meds when they're working for you and they're serving you when you need them.
Oh my gosh, I will do anything. Like if they're working, what I had to go through, and like just the seizures, and near the end, like when I would have the seizures, I was like aware until I was on the ground, and just like those feelings, I was like, I will do anything.
It's scary.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm just very well in this space. And I feel like, especially since I got diagnosed, I've almost taken care of myself even more, just because I know it's so important. Like for me, like the only side effect I really had was I would just like get tired earlier than I was used to. Like luckily I haven't had anything too crazy, but I just, I'm more aware of my body. And so like overtraining and just getting good sleeps and like eating, like all that, I think is just kind of got kicked into high gear once I got diagnosed. Because obviously my immune system also, I will say I get like colds and flus a little bit more often just because of it.
Yeah.
But I've kind of learned to live with it, and just, I'm like, I love being super open about it. And I've met so many people that have epilepsy that like I would have never thought did or would have never kind of like spoke up if they didn't hear my story. So it is really touching. And I love when people bring it up to me. I'm like so open about it. I'm like, yes, talk to me about it. Like I want to hear it. And
I was going to ask, I find your story so interesting because it felt like your story was public before you could even think about it. Like your community knew, like intertwined with your life. And I don't know about you, Soph, but sometimes I feel like I hear more stories of people dealing with it in private and then having to kind of maybe find a metric for them to tell those closest to them. So like, how was that for you to be like, okay, before I even know what this is, everyone around me knows? And was there any kind of stigma you were afraid of, or were you kind of like, I'm eager to make eye contact with this and I'm like just kind of pushing forward?
I mean, I think it's tough because I was so young. So I was so like in this, like, I don't know what's happening, but like trust my family, but also dancing and acting and wanting to continue on with my life. So I was more so just like, okay, let's bite the bullet. Let's get it figured out and move on. It's definitely embarrassing. Like my seizures were like, again, not pretty, like from throwing up to like literally peeing your pants to biting your tongue, popping blood vessels. You're flailing on the floor, like in auditions in front of people, like at Broadway Dance Center. And people are like, what the heck is happening to this girl? Like on the floor. Like it's definitely not fun. And it's definitely embarrassing for sure. But at the same time, I think like I definitely wouldn't be who I am today without those scenarios and going through that. And I think like bringing it to fruition again has helped so many people with me being open about it, that's also brought so much inspiration for me to want to share more about it. But I would say it's definitely been a journey for sure. And even still to this day, like there's some moments where I just have to tell the teachers or go into auditions like, hey, like, just so you know, I do have epilepsy. Like, I'm totally good. But like, if you see me having to like leave the room for a second to just take a breather, like, don't worry. Like, and sometimes it's odd because, I am like not such, but like I definitely am a professional in the dance industry. So it's not embarrassing, but it's also like, people be like, well, suck it up, Briar. But no, I feel like I'm like, you know what? This is like what I live with. This is what I have. Like, it's going to bring me more stress if they don't know. And just, hopefully nothing does happen, but you do never know, there could be.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really hard, especially I grew up dancing and was in sort of the professional realm as a teenager out here in LA. And I love the dance community, do not get me wrong, but there's also like way fewer regulations and protections for dancers than I think there are in so many other facets of employment.
Yeah.
And how did you feel like, did you ever worry about having to talk, like having these conversations with choreographers and with employers basically for you and like fearing how that would affect your employment? I mean, obviously you're like at the top of your game and you've managed to get through that. So I just would love to kind of hear how that went for you.
Yeah. Honestly, for some reason, I never really felt like nervous to tell people or embarrassed because I was like, like this is what I have. This is life. Like if this, I'm sure as you guys know, the acting, like, it's meant to be, it's going to be. But like, I'd rather feel safe and like know for sure. And I feel like it depends on the scenario. Like some auditions, I'm like, oh no, this is fine. Like I've done this a million times. But if there's like a day where I just feel off or a little bit more anxious or a class where I'm like going into it, like, okay, I feel a little bit iffy, then I'll tell the teachers. But not all the time will I. I just think it's one of those things where some people know, some people don't. I just kind of like play the situation by ear. But I am super open about it. And I'm almost like proud to talk about it. I'm like, hey, so like I have epilepsy. They're triggered by dancing, but I just wanted to let you know, like, it's not like,
Well, there's something to be said, I think, for the confidence of which you approach it for. Like I would be like, oh, well, I'm not worried about you. Even though you just gave me this really big thing to worry about, I think there can be something to be learned for the fact that like your effort to prioritize your safety also will kind of instill confidence in other people. If I had to take a guess as to like, if I was on the receiving end of that, I'd be like, oh, okay, I have no idea how to help this girl maybe, but she seems like she gets it. And like, as long as she's okay to take care of herself, like I'll just try to do what I can. And so I think that's, it's cool to hear from your perspective because like Karan said, we do hear so many people who are dealing with this more privately and you're kind of forced to deal with it publicly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My trigger is literally dance. I was like, I definitely have to be a little bit more careful. And I think it brings me peace of mind to let like the teachers know sometimes, or if I think it's the right scenario to let someone know, just so that if I do have to like not sit down for a sec, but sometimes I'll have to go like take an extra medication. If I am feeling super anxious, it gives me peace of mind to go take that or to just go like sometimes I remember one class I was assisting, I had to like just go behind the stage and just lay down for a second, like take a few breaths and kind of like catch back in. Cause sometimes genuinely, like if I do blank out just out of like blanking out, that's what kind of freaks me out because that would set me into a seizure. So sometimes like just the blank out as a normal person without actually having a seizure is what brings on that anxiety. And it could be like a 7-year-old's dance class. And I'm like, oh, okay, no, you're fine. Like, it's funny. It happens in random scenarios, random times.
It's like, I admire it so much, like how you're kind of like dance is such a, important part of who I am. And it's where that's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And yet like you prioritize safety in like a really impressive way, where you have the space that you need. Now, was this kind of like your parents came in and they were like, look, if you want to do this, like, here are the rules? Or because like I intrinsically, like I could understand how you'd just be like, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to push it to the side and I want to power through. So how'd you learn to kind of stick with this without risking your own safety?
And like navigating that with your parents and people who are concerned.
Totally. It was definitely a battle. Like, I'm a very stubborn person. I was like, no, I'm still dancing. I'm going in no matter what. Like, my parents, again, they hadn't seen one, which I'm very thankful for because I think if they saw one, it would probably change their perspective on some things, to be honest. But my dance teachers and everyone, they knew the situation. So I think they were just trying to make me happy by being in the studio, but just giving the right guidance on like, okay, how can we work around with her right now? Because I was just a little bit like stubborn, but also they're trying to take care of me. So it was like this weird kind of situation. But I think like by the end, everyone was kind of like, I remember everyone was kind of like, okay, Briar, like just take a month or two, just like figure it out. But my parents have been like supportive from the beginning. There was never a moment where they're like, okay, Briar, like you're not going into the studio. They were more just like, okay, like she wants to go in there. Let's just, my mom especially. My dad, I feel like he's not as he's more of a dad. He's more like, I'm here if you need anything, but like he's working. He's not as like emotionally there. My mom, I think, was like definitely freaked out to the core and just trying to do anything and everything to help the situation. Yeah. And even to this day, she's always checking in on me, always making sure like, hey, do you have enough medication for like this trip? Make sure you're eating okay. Or like before I take a dance class, are you okay? Like, I know this is a hard one. Like, how do you feel about it? But I think it was definitely, it's definitely been a trial and error. I'm just, again, so open about it that I feel like my parents do trust me to let them know if something feels a little off. They trust me. Like, I have such open communication with my neurologist. So like, I'll email him if I'm like, hey, feeling a little off this week. Should I take an extra medication or do you think this? Like, I'm traveling to Australia. Like, should I change my medication time? Like, we have such a great relationship that I'll even go in every 2 years and just do updated testings. And just, keep in touch with him. So I think even more confidence that I have him there. Like, if I have any questions, he's like right on my email. Like, just like I can just talk to him anytime and he's super open. He'll get me in person if I need to see him when I'm back in Toronto at any point. So I think it's definitely been a learning curve for all of us. My parents were definitely freaked out, especially my mom. Like, it definitely was traumatizing, to be completely honest, for I think all of us, but especially her, because she just didn't know, like, there's no way you can really help, to be honest. Like, there in person, she would just pick me up and kind of see how I was after the fact, which I think was really hard. So
yeah, I mean, there's nothing you can do, and it's really hard for loved ones, I think, in these situations. And as like hard, it's obviously really hard for you, but I think there's something to what you said about like keeping the communication really open.
But when I was younger, like my mom was like, I would literally come to check on you to make sure you're breathing like in the middle of the night. Like, they had no idea, right? Because it's just when it's not diagnosed yet, but these seizures are happening, but they're, they could happen at any point. Like, you really don't know, because especially I didn't have answers. My mom would literally just come sleep with me, like come check in on me. Like, it was definitely, scary, to the point where now she's like, oh, you didn't, like, she's telling me things like those things where I didn't even know, like, I would just be dead asleep, but she would, be freaking out and barely probably getting any sleep during those times. So I think as like a parent, it's tough. As a kid as well.
But that's also like good that she protected you from that in a lot of ways, because you were already dealing with going through that. Yeah. And I mean, like, she sounds like an incredible parent who wasn't trying to like also burden you with her worry in a lot of ways.
It's tricky though, because like I haven't actually seen anyone else have a seizure, but there is so many people with epilepsy or like situations with it. I remember when I was filming World of Dance. So as soon as I was diagnosed, 6 months later, I was on a dance reality show because I was like, okay, we're fine. Here we go. But I remember on that show, there was 4 other people that I don't know for sure had epilepsy, but like 4 of them were dealing with, or maybe I was the 4th. 3 or 4 people though were having seizures or dealing with
Oh,
seizures. Like
wow.
2
Oh
of
my
them would
God.
have seizures like on set. So where they'd be like, Briar, we
What?
have to put you in this room because like we just don't want you to see it, because I didn't know if it would trigger me. And I don't know. I haven't been around it, and I'm sorry, I just do keep my distance in those situations. But yeah, one guy would come off stage and have like seizures. One girl would more have like the spaced out, like she would space out.
Yeah.
Yes, I didn't see it, but yeah, it was really interesting to know that like just in one scenario with maybe a few hundred people, like 4 of us were dealing with some sort of seizure. And it touched me because like I'm just so grateful that like I have medication that works. Like these 2 others had been having seizures for a few years and had no answers. Like the mom of the one girl was like trying to figure it out. Like I was trying to help her. I was trying to give her my neurologist information. I'm like, I don't know. Like they were trying medications, and I just felt so grateful, but also I felt so bad that like they had to keep dealing with them, right?
When you came out publicly with your story on World of Dance, obviously it sounds like very soon after you were going through this.
Yeah.
How did that feel like on a public stage? Did you remember feeling like you knew other like celebrities that had epilepsy, or were you feeling like this was like something you'd never heard talked about before?
Yeah, I definitely didn't really know any other celebrities that had it. I was kind of just like, okay, I went through this and this is like my story and this is how it happened. But I mean, with reality shows, it's tough because you don't really know how they're going to play it, what they're going to air, what they're not. I also was 18, so I feel like the way I would talk about it now is completely different from how I probably saw it at that time, because I was literally just,
You were in it, like you were in the new phase. Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, it was definitely a platform where I wanted to share, or at least start to kind of share my story, because the previous years, there's probably so many people out there like, what's happening? Like Briar's a little bit quieter these days. Again, I was at the peak of my dance career when my seizure started, so it's kind of just like, where did she go? So it was nice to kind of get my story out there and at least just share it. But again, I feel like now it's so nice to be able to like see it from a different perspective and just like share it a different way, because I see it from, again, such a different perspective at this point in my life.
Speaking of being on set or just, being a dancer, so if I know we've talked a lot about independence and how I think you got a phone pretty early on as like a
Oh,
teenager.
yeah, I did, just because I was always at the dance studio and my parents were like, you just have to be able to text us that you're live because you're
Yeah.
there for like 6 hours
Yeah,
a
or
day.
when you're done, because they're like, I don't want to wait in parking.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Or my favorite is, as a young person on set, like there is a level of independence where you probably want to be independent and navigate the space on your own, or you're having to kind of, if I'm rehearsing a scene, I can't really have my dad right next to me being like, oh, actually, this is how you say that word,
Right.
Karan, or whatever it might be.
Totally.
And how is it navigating and establishing your independence? Because you're already doing that as a young person, but with this diagnosis, how'd you navigate that with your parents?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing was I feel like because I was acting since like 13 and having, and even touring, I had that, or I had to kind of force to be grown up even before my seizures had started. But I feel like as I got older, I'm a very like, I'm close with my family, but I'm definitely so independent that I don't like share everything. I'm very much like, no, I'll deal with it. I'll figure it out. Like again, just forced to grow up young and then being on set and then traveling and touring and being on shows and having to move to different places. Like I've just always had that independence, but I've found that communication has just been the biggest thing between me and my parents, or me and my sister, or close friends, or in auditions and my agents. Like it's just so important to keep everyone up to date. And I've noticed that because at first I was very much, again, just like independent, keep it to myself, only tell the people that need to be told. And again, like when I wasn't diagnosed, I was still touring. And so I had lights flashing, like I was on full tour. So people had no, like,
That's crazy.
yeah, they're like, are you gonna go down? Because there is like this, and I had a full conversation with my neurologist about like there's like this such a stigma about, one, like, oh, lights are the only thing that triggers people with epilepsy, or like, two, you smell burnt toast before you go, like there's all these like little things that my neurologist is like, no, like maybe 3% of people like have this. It's like there's so many things that are just untalked about and uncommunicated with the public about. So it's definitely been like an eye opener, and that's why when I talk to people, I'm like, no, it's not lights, I'm completely fine. Like, yes, like be aware of it, but I'm okay. Like I just kind of have to listen to my body, and this is my situation. And so just like want you guys to know this. But yeah, there is a lot of like stigma around the fact that it's just like, oh, so you're like, oh, strobe lights affect you. I'm like, no, I'm fine.
You friends give you that like space and they're like, cool, let us know if you need anything? Or because I think I've been at fault for this with, because we actually do have a few friends other than Cam that have dealt with epilepsy where I've probably been a little bit hyper anxious about being like, what, is there anything that I can do? How, like, were your friends ever?
Yeah, they're always like,
Yeah,
Briar, you know, I'll
yeah.
just keep going until I literally have a seizure. Like, I probably could have had 2 instead of 30 if I just stayed out of a dance studio for
Right.
like 2 years, right? But I was like, no, like I'm so stubborn in that way. I'm like, no, I'm gonna keep going. I'm fine. We'll figure it out. So yeah, no, definitely stubborn. Definitely could have probably.
But the point is that you didn't, and like you kept your career going and amazing, and like you figured it all out. And as much as that was probably really hard period of your life, like getting through that and being able to kind of come out the other side of that is
Totally.
amazing.
And I think if I
So
didn't, again, I wouldn't be where I am, and I probably wouldn't have even like shared it as well as I did, and hopefully like touched as many people as I did. So I love, especially because I do travel quite worldwide. I get to see so many people and meet so many people that have epilepsy in different forms. Some people come to my classes and have like their service dog with them, and they're like so excited to like tell me about it and show me, how they deal with it, and they ask if, it's honestly touching, which is why I'm so open about it. And I think it is just one of those things that like should be talked about more. And everyone's, again, situation is different. Everyone's seizures are so different. But I think it's like almost something to be way more proud of than to be like embarrassed by, because the amount that I had to go through to kind of get where I am, I just hope to kind of share and inspire people with that have it, so it doesn't feel like they need to be like hindered and kind of like embarrassed and like can't keep going towards their goals. Because truly, like, I could have stopped dancing even like now and chose a different career path but I was like, no, like, this is what I want to do. This is what I love to do. And unfortunately, like, my seizures are triggered by what I love to do. But, we'll find a way. We'll figure it out as long as like I'm healthy and taking care of myself and I have a strong support system around me. Then like, I just want to share my story and hope to, help other people. Because like, unfortunately, like Cam's situation, like there's some people that it just happens and there's not much you can do. Like, it's so sad. Like, it literally breaks my heart. But even the fact that you guys like have this foundation and openly talk about it with other people, like that's just exactly what I want to do. Like, every time I get on a show or I book something or podcast, I'm like, let me share my story, because I just want it to get out to as many people as possible to just create that awareness.
we're very grateful for that and for you talking to us today, because that is exactly what we're trying to do, is sort of change the conversation around epilepsy as something that people can understand and know so much more about, because you still have so many people who don't know anything. And then for the people that are going through it, to have different examples of what epilepsy looks like, because one of the crazy things about it is how individual it is as a disease and how different it looks person to person. And I mean, yeah, I know when something like dance, and I think Cameron would have felt the same way, it's like that's a part of your identity. So epilepsy and having seizures is just going to have to be a part of your identity now, because you're not giving yourself up. And you figured that out. And I don't know, we're very inspired. Karan, do you have any like final questions? I feel like that you really kind of just wrapped it up beautifully for us there, honestly.
Yeah, I do have one more question, which is, what's one thing you wish more people knew about epilepsy?
Oh, that's a good question. What do I wish people knew more about epilepsy? I would say, oh my gosh, that's such a good one.
I mean, you've kind of said a lot of things, but I know like if there's any one thing, it's hard to pick.
It can, and also it's like, it can be drink more water, talk to more people. Like, it's not that scary. Believe us when we, whatever.
Yeah, I feel like it would be like, it is a scary thing to see. Like, seizures are not, they're probably one of the scariest things you could ever see. Like, they just look so, like so scary. But I think like, just like helping someone in the, like, I think how to deal with when someone's having a seizure is probably something I wish people knew more about. Like, everyone just, again, assumes like, okay, lay them on their side. But there is, like, that is obviously one thing. But I think just having people knowing a little bit more about, okay, if someone's were to have a seizure, like, this is more the protocol, like, just kind of knowing and being more aware of it and not being freaked out and like running away from it. But like, like being the person that like, okay, even though this is scary to see, like, turn them on their side, like, just wait it out, like, hold their legs out, like, just do whatever they need to do. Obviously, don't put your hands in their mouth. Like, just learning like the little things about it, I feel like is just important to know, because you just never know when you're going to have to deal with something like that. And as much as, like I said, it is one of the scariest things you could ever witness, I think just knowing how to deal with it, if you ever need to deal with it, is going to be important. And then of course, just like checking in on those people that you know do have it. And if there's anything, that you can do, obviously that's super helpful. I know that my friends, like if I'm in a dance class and they know my situation, they know me, they know if I'm giving them a look, like they'll, take more initiative to step forward a little bit more to give me a little bit of a break. So I think just, being aware, knowing your surroundings, and just knowing the protocol that if someone were to have one, not being freaked out, but, helping them in the right way, and not
Totally.
away from it.
I think that the information thing, it's like you said, they're really scary to see, having seen them myself. But I wish when I saw my first one that I was more informed, because you also don't want to I know from speaking for myself, like the last thing I want is someone to wake up for a seizure and then be worried that I'm terrified. And because people don't have information, that's like what you're dealing with, because you're waking up and having to like reassure everyone around you all the time. And I think that how you said it is totally correct. Yes, it's really, really scary, but the more we can spread the information, the more people can be kind of prepared for that.
Yeah, just I feel like when I even talk to my neurologist, like, yes, everyone think like you smell burnt toast, it's because of lights. Turn them on their side, they can swallow their tongue. Like there's just so many things that just people associate epilepsy with, but there's so much more to it. That's actually kind of like, it's not even like crazy. It's nothing intense, but it's like, okay, like just turn them on their side. No, like my neurologist like, Briar, you can't swallow your tongue because it's attached to your mouth. Like you're fine. So you don't like throw up and like actually choke on. Like there's so much more that, again, like there's just these, assumptions. And I think just if people were to be more aware of those situations, then it might kind of help ease the process if someone has to deal with it in public or with someone that they know.
Yeah.
Perfectly said.
Thank you.
Briar, your story is absolutely amazing. And for those that are listening, how can they keep up with you? How can they, keep up with your story?
Yeah, I mean, so on all my social media platforms, it's just Briar Nolet. And I just try and share as much as I can about obviously my personal life, my career, but also epilepsy, as you guys know, is something that's very important to me. So this podcast and anything else that I share about it will definitely be there.
And this podcast wouldn't be possible without our phenomenal sponsor, UCB. So thank you, UCB, for making this possible.
If you are interested in learning more about seizure first aid, we actually have a handout on our website, thecameronboysfoundation.org, along with like a bunch of other resources about finding neurologists and all of the things we kind of talked about today. So go check that out. Check out our seizure first aid handout like Briar wants. And have a great day. Thanks for listening, guys.
Bye, guys.